give it a go.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Mario Lorio. I will be hosting this Kubernetes community meeting on January 25th, 2018. I am based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I work for Liquid Web, a company that helps host web properties for small and medium-sized businesses. And I work on Kubernetes, which we're using to build the foundation for our managed applications as we go toward the future. So thank you, George, for inviting me to do this. And let's get started with a demo on Kube Toolkit from Radu.
Hi, everyone. I'm Radu. And let me just share my screen. Let me know when you see it. So,
yeah, we can see that. And just one quick note, please be mindful of your mic and mute so that we can hear these beautiful people talking and presenting. Thank you.
OK, so before we actually get started with Kube Toolkit, there's a small little package that I'd like to show you. It's called CubeExact. And basically, if you're familiar with OS exec from Golang, this does exactly that, but for remote Kubernetes pods. So the API is strikingly similar to OS exec. You define a command, you specify the standard input, standard output, or standard error, and then you just run your command. So essentially, so what is this going to do? It will create a Kubernetes pod. It will create a Kubernetes pod. It will wait for it to be in running state, and then it will attach to it, execute that command, put your standard input and output, and then exit. So this was just run inside a Kubernetes pod, and we can also have an example where we attach the standard input. And this will basically take whatever is in your standard input, whatever I type on the keyboard, will push it to the container and execute that command. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I'll put the link from the GitHub repo in the description. Now, Kube Toolkit. Essentially, what it wants it to be, it's a toolkit for creating gRPC-based CLI and web tools for Kubernetes. So essentially, there are lots of awesome tools for Kubernetes, for example, kubectl, Helm, Draft. These are CLI-based tools with a server-side component in Kubernetes. And there are also some other projects that have also web-based components. So for example, for Helm, there's a monocular component. That's a web-based component that interacts with the Tiller server. Now, what this tries to do is basically help you get started much faster with your Kubernetes tool and not have to worry about setting up the gRPC client or the server, setting up the communication between that, what you do with code generation for the web tool, and stuff like that. So essentially, it comes out of the box. You have a CLI client. Sorry? OK. So out of the box, you have a Golang CLI. It's a Cobra CLI that connects to a gRPC server that sits in a Kubernetes pod. And basically, they talk through Kubernetes tunnels, just like Helm does. And if you're familiar with Helm or Draft architecture, this will be very, very familiar, at least the client and the server part. And on top of that, there's also a web dashboard. And for the communication between the web dashboard and the gRPC server, we use gRPC Gateway. It's a project that creates a reverse proxy so that for every gRPC service that you create, you can also automatically generate the gateway, an HTTP gateway. So you don't have to write another API or write another client that talks to the server back. So as I said, the client interacts with the server through tunnels. And basically, that's it. You don't need anything else installed. And let's see how it actually works. So whenever you have any sort of question, just put them in the chat. So essentially, you need first to pass the kubeconfig, the path to your kubeconfig as an environment variable, and then so there's nothing on the cluster right now. And essentially, this is self-deploying. So it's using the Kubernetes API to deploy itself, to deploy a pod containing the gRPC server and the web dashboard. This basically created the deployment. And it's now in... and it's now created. This is the one. And essentially, from this point on, you can interact with the with it through the command line interface. So there's a debug flag that tells you to which pod it's talking to and which local port it's using for the tunnel. And essentially, all it does it prints the version. You can also do gRPC streaming. It's just an implementation detail. Right now, the server is streaming data back to the client. And basically, from this point on, you only have to implement your own functionality. You don't need to worry about creating the communication and doing tunnels and stuff like that. There's also a proxy command that starts a proxy back to the dashboard pod, back to the dashboard container, and allows you to access the dashboard on localhost. So proxy, you can specify the port. And right now, it started a localhost. Yeah, and at this point, it's only the version command implemented, and it talks back to the gRPC server that executes the request. So what you would want to do, you would want to extend this. At this point, it's only a starting point. And let's take a look a little at what's in the box. So as I said, there's the so if you want to extend it, first you have to look at the Protobuf definition, and this is the stream command. It's simply an RPC server stream. One note at this point, it's using the gRPC gateway project that I mentioned earlier. This is while the gRPC web project, it's still in private preview, so it's not available to be used right now. Once the gRPC web project is out, basically, we will switch the gRPC gateway to just gRPC web, and we'll be able to do streaming on the JavaScript client as well. So basically, if you want to add your functionality, you add it in the Protobuf. You add your method description. You specify if you want to expose it as HTTP as well. And at this point, all you have to do is implement another command. This is how the version command is implemented. It's strikingly similar to what Helm and Draft are doing. It's a simplified version of that. You implement the client. You also have to implement the server. This is basically the get version command. It's basically once you have this project up and running, extending it should not be that difficult. This will also create the Swagger definition, the Open API definition for you. So this is automatically generated by the Swagger code generator. And together with the Swagger definition, you also get the TypeScript and Angular code generated client. And basically, all you have to do to extend the functionality is add a new Cobra command and add a new Angular component. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is automatically created for you. And you can take a look at the make file. It creates the generated client for you. So this is just a toolkit for starting awesome next Kubernetes tools. So if you have any sort of questions, I'll be around. I'll post the links for both projects on the chat, and just give me any questions if you have. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, just go ahead and unmute if you have any questions for Radu or post into the chat, we'll give just a few more seconds for those. Awesome. Thank you very much, Radu. That was very insightful. So next up, let's go to Jeff Borek, who's going to talk about the Index Conference. Jeff?
Hey, thanks, Mario, and I appreciate the time on today's weekly call. My name's Jeff Borek. Some of you may know me from my work in the CNCF and the OCI and other community work for IBM. I wanted to take just a few minutes to make folks aware of a unique opportunity for the Kubernetes SIGs to take advantage of, related to a very developer-centric conference that IBM's hosting in the Bay Area next month called Index. And with that, I'll throw a link to the Index conference up in the chat. The whole purpose behind this conference is to do an unconference, if you will. It's not a typical IBM big tent brand-related conference to promote IBM. This is a developer conference where IBM secured space in the Moscone West. The track chairs, there's 7 or 8 tracks. Most of the track hosts are non-IBM developers. The tracks themselves are all focused on a variety of topics across, cloud native, but also AI, Node.js Foundation, and all sorts of other tracked areas that are of interest to developers. That's happening on days 1 and 2 of the conference on February 21st and 22nd. On day 0, the day before the conference, IBM is hosting some workshops, but also making a big outreach to the communities and offering significant resource in the form of space in the Moscone Center to hold whatever the community wants to do. So I've been working for the last month or more, engaging with communities as wide-ranging as Cloud Foundry, the CNCF, but also others like the Open API Initiative associated with the Swagger project. And we've got a great amount of interest and reaction and amount of participation. So what we're proposing for the Kubernetes community is to do a Meet the SIGs type of Kubernetes community day. And Sarah Novotny has kindly agreed to act as a keynote speaker for this community day event. We've got a room that's about 70 by 45 in the Moscone. It'll be set up with multiple round tables. And so far, we've got the doc SIG, and we've also got significant interest from the CubeExact SIG to consider joining. We'd like to accommodate as many SIGs as we can from the community. And at that time, the SIGs will be able to get greater awareness for what their SIG is about, and at the same time, people that have been engaging in the Kubernetes community and are kind of ready to kick it up to the next level can show up for this community day for Kubernetes SIGs, hear about the advantages and the great work that the SIGs do, and be able to, if they so choose, elect to stay and collaborate with some of the SIGs as the SIGs use the rest of the day to do face-to-face SIG work to advance their SIGs. So that's a quick 5-minute flyby. I'll put my information and contact info up in the chat as well. But if I'll pause for a second and see if there are any comments or questions. I know that Sadev from IBM has been talking with the CubeExact SIG. I've been working with the doc SIG myself, and we'd love to have, again, as many as spaces available for the SIGs to take advantage of this. A couple of other highlights. As I get ready to take a question or two, the event, the Community Day event on day 0 is completely free. All you have to do is register. So the price is right. And for those that are interested in attending the rest of the developer conference, you can check out the agenda and the session. There's going to be some interesting stuff on AI, both on TensorFlow on day 0 with the community, as well as the thought leaders in TensorFlow is going to be doing a keynote on day 1 or day 2. And the SIGs that, the communities that participate in day 0 will get a special discount code for 50% off the rest of the conference if they so choose to attend that as well. So that's a quick 411 from me on the Kubernetes SIG Community Day. We'll circle back maybe in a week or two and provide additional details as we get closer as appropriate. With that, I'll pause for a second and see if anyone wants to ask a question or toss a peanut from the gallery.
Awesome. Yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and unmute and ask. We'll give a few more seconds. Okay, so thank you, Jeff. That was fantastic. Index sounds really interesting. We will move on to release updates with Jace. Take it away.
I appreciate the opportunity. We'll catch you later.
Thank you. Yeah, a quick update on the 1.10 release schedule. We are in week 4 of 12. So if you look at the progress bar of the release, we're moving right along. Stop laughing at me, Paris. So feature freeze was supposed to be this week, but due to a bit of slowness in getting the features repo populated with all the current things in the milestone, we are going to head and push it off until next Monday. And I'll let Ihor Dvoretsky take a moment to talk about the features process in general, and then I'll come back. So Ihor, are you here?
I'm here. I'll just like to mention that my laptop is out of so I can drop in anytime. Yeah, so the bad news were that we had to push the features freeze in a week, but the good news that we are really good, in a really good feeling this week with the features. We have almost 30 features that are coming to Kubernetes 1.10 release. They're all tracked in a features spreadsheet that is available in a link in the meeting notes. Again, it's a friendly reminder for everyone. If you have any feature in your mind that you are targeting for 1.10 release, you still have extra few days before Monday to put it there to the feature spreadsheet. And Jace?
Yeah, and just to give a quick PSA on why the feature process is so important. So the features that go into this repository really feed out a lot of other things, such as how we market the release and share this information with our community. So it's not just a bunch of administrivia to serve some unknown purpose. This is really important to the health of the release in our community. So the features repo is where we really keep the record of note on what delivery in terms of major functionality initiatives are coming out of SIGs. So this is the direct pipeline between what's delivered and how the community sees it. So again, when SIGs participate in this and provide more information and help us understand what's going into the release, it helps us also raise the awareness for SIGs and get more contributors, and it's a really nice positive feedback loop. So the features process can be a bit cumbersome sometimes, and we're working on trying to make that better and easier, but it's a slow process and certainly something that we'll do better at as we move along. In terms of the release cadence, we are looking at an alpha release ideally next Tuesday. That will be Caleb Miles, who is new to Google and is working on getting the requisite permissions to do the branch release process. And hopefully next community meeting, I'll be able to announce that we have released our first alpha. That's pretty much it for the 1.10 release. On behalf of Mehdi Bolul, who did the 1.9.2 release, thank you. That is really great. A shout out to all the patch managers of current and past. It is a very long 9-month slog to be a patch manager. So if you see a patch manager around, give them the thanks, because it is a very long tenure as far as volunteering for that position. So thank you to Mehdi and Wojtek and Ian and gosh, there's so many. Thank you all. It's a lot of work that you do, and I appreciate it, and the community does as well. 188, there's no TA that I've heard about, but if somebody hears differently, we'll make sure that it goes out to the Kubernetes dev list. So, all right, that's all I've got. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jace. Fantastic. I'm excited for 110. Let's move to the graph of the week with Aaron.
Hi, I'm not super prepared for this. Give me a second.
That's okay.
Okay, things and stuff. What did I say I was going to share for graph of the week? I think it was SIG mentions using categories. We'll try that. Okay, sweet. Yeah, this will work. Okay, so when I say categories, what do I mean? I'm going to pick on SIG CLI. Down here, you can see that there are 8 different GitHub teams that I can use to get somebody's attention in the CLI team. And in theory, if I want to get somebody's attention for general discussion, I should be using the MISC team. If I want somebody to take a look at my pull request and I know that it's CLI related, I should be using the PR reviews team. So we have devstat set up with sort of like regular expression-based parsing to look at the first half and derive the SIG name from that, look at the second half and derive a category from that. So if I flip back to devstats, maybe this makes a little more sense, where I can see that I have the 8 different categories on the right, and then the second graph here shows what those categories are for a specific SIG. This graph is not 100% where I want it to be, but it's getting there. The reason I wanted to see this graph, just personally speaking, is all right, this is my personal opinion, not necessarily the opinion of the Kubernetes community nor my employer. I think that's way too many freaking GitHub teams. This is 8 teams times however many SIGs we have, which means I think if we have like 30 SIGs, if I click to Kubernetes and I look at teams here, that's 296 GitHub teams for 577 people. Are we actually getting value out of all of these teams? Like, number one, the point of me showing you this graph is to remind you that we do have all of these teams. And I think actually I was proven by this graph that some people are getting value out of these teams. The reason being that I thought for the longest time that the MISC team was the team that was being used for all SIGs, because we used to live in this world where you notify a SIG and you just use the MISC team because you just want their attention. But it turns out, in terms of total usage, the pull request review category has been used more. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense, because oftentimes the reason we want somebody's attention is we want them to take a look at our pull request. Now, the graph I'd love to be able to show you, which I kind of can't so much, is like which SIGs are using which of these categories the most. So, like, good job, the SIGs who are using pull request review. But unfortunately, for me to find which SIGs are contributing to this total graph the most, I kind of have to flip through this SIG box here. First, I'm going to change it to aggregate by month instead of a moving average. And then next, I'm pretty sure CLI was one of the larger ones that started using CLI significantly more than anything else. So this was me sort of cheating ahead of time and knowing that they do that. This seems like a really useful convention. The MISC thing is honestly, again, it's the one that I use personally to like get somebody's attention if I have a question around like, hey, is this a good idea, or should we close this? That's most often the team that I'm personally using. Then there's also like the bug team, or like, hey, I think there's a bug here. Now, I'm pretty sure the way we have automation set up is that if I'm a member of Kubernetes and I actually mention, oh God, I've lost my place. If I mention one of those specific categories, like @SIG CLI-bugs, the bot will actually automatically apply a label to the issue as well. And that label will both be like the SIG label and the, okay. So that's that's kind of where I'm at. And George has raised his hand for so long, even my arm is feeling tired on his behalf. And I've noticed the chat has kind of blown up. So I'm going to sort of stop it there. But this has been today's graph review.
Yeah, we have three SIG updates, so I'm going to hard disk cut off at 30 after. But real quick, a question. If we're going to be assigning code to SIGs, and SIGs are responsible for that bit of stuff, and things that are affected, those SIG gets assigned to them, can we just naturally lose the 75 things I need to CC? And then just
difficulty in assigning SIGs is SIGs aren't people. SIGs are made up of people, but they're not people themselves. So those teams I pointed you to are intended to be used for notification purposes. Each of those teams has at least one user that like ends up auto-archiving all of those messages to a publicly available Google group. So the idea is if this was all intended to like help with routing of notifications to the right people.
Yeah, I get that. It just feels to me that a lot of people have filed bankruptcy on their notifications, and I see in bugs. If it's just me, I'll shut up. But I see in bugs sometimes people get confused, and they just CC them all anyway. And then I'll look in SIG groups, and it looks like it's the same people in all 7 groups. So I'm wondering the value as well. Like
I could not agree with you more.
Okay.
This graph is the strongest case against it, but it's still weird. It still kind of goes against my feelings as a human being. So my other ulterior motive in bringing up this graph was, number one, for those of you who aren't aware of all those teams, maybe now you know, and I'm telling you a little bit about how they're used and why they're used. But if you are a member of a SIG that's not really using that and you're not getting a lot of value out of it, I'd love to have a discussion about this on the Kubernetes dev mailing list, or maybe even the contributor experience SIG, because I can say, like, if I were a new contributor to this and I needed to get somebody's attention and I had to choose between one of 30 different SIGs and then I had to choose between one of 8 different teams, it would seem a little daunting. We have bots in place that now are designed to, oh my God, George has a +1 sign. Okay, that's just great. So I'd like to find a way to figure out, counter to that, people who are actually using these, I want to hear from you. People who have found these more effective in actually triaging and routing notifications. I don't want to turn off something that you actually find useful. That's not my motive. I'm here to like allow you to make mistakes and automate what you do so we can go faster. And this just seems like a crazy point of friction. So this has been your graph of the week and an associated rant. I will try and keep next week more graph focused, less rant focused. Thank you. I will hand off to Mario.
Thank you very much, sir. And your beard is magnificent. That is why I get up in the morning to work toward that. Very, very much for that. So let's kind of pivot over to SIG updates. And I don't think Rob Hirschfield is here. So let's go to SIG Service Catalog with Paul.
Hey, everybody. I just need a moment here to get my notes up. So for anybody that's not aware, SIG Service Catalog develops the Service Catalog Incubator repo, which is an integration between Kubernetes and brokers that implement the Open Service Broker API. Service Broker is something that offers a set of capabilities, and the point of the Service Catalog project is to allow you to provision new instances of those things, bind to them in your application, and then when you're done, unbind and deprovision. So an example of what that is a service might be a database as a service. When you provision it, you get an instance of that database. You get your database. That's an instance of that service. And when you bind to that instance, you get a connection string and credentials that you need to use the database that you consume in your app via Kubernetes secret. When you're done, you unbind and the secret goes away, and deprovision, and the resources associated with the instance of your service go away. The service broker handles implementing all of those things, and you can plug any number of brokers into the service catalog. So since we last gave an update, which I want to say was perhaps September of 2017, we had a face-to-face meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina to discuss scoping for the next milestone and deep dive on some problems that we've been trying to figure out solutions for. We had a SIG update and a deep dive session at CubeCon, and thanks to everybody that attended that or attended those. And also, Microsoft has donated their ServiceCat CLI to the project, which is really promising as a way to give a good CLI user experience beyond what we'd be able to get from kubectl. So I encourage all of you to check that out if you're interested in the problem space, and thanks a lot to Microsoft for the donation. We're currently working on improving code quality and testing and have been grooming things in our 0.2.0 milestone. The big things we're kind of looking at for the next milestone are improving docs, improving the kubectl experience, both with that CLI binary and also by kind of trying to move the ball forward on the basic kubectl get and explain experience. Also quota support, and then controlling access to services and plans. So if you're looking to get involved, this is a really great time. We're looking for folks to drive features for the next milestone. And what we mean by that is analyze the problem space and make a proposal, handle forming consensus around that, and then implement or work with somebody else to get it implemented. So if you're interested in attending, we'd love to have you. Our meetings are Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And that's what I've got. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. I'm not sure. Jeff Reagan, are you here? No, I don't think he is here. So that is the end of SIG updates. And for now, let's pivot to the final line item, which is announcements.
Sorry, can I interrupt there? I'm going to fill in for Jeff Reagan, if that's okay. This is Sean Sullivan from Google.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Sean. Thanks.
So this will actually be a very short update. The January 3rd SIG CLI meeting was canceled, so there's only been one meeting within the last month, and there was a couple of items that we'd like to highlight. First, there's within SIG CLI, there's been efforts and a lot of discussions and some progress on moving apply and merge to the server side. In addition, in 1.10, server-side printing is going to go to beta. I'm not sure if the community's heard much about in previous updates about the KTL proposal by Phil Whitrock, which is quite a major change, discussing basically breaking up the monolith, which is kubectl. And there's that's still in the discussion and proposal stage. And basically that's about all that I have for SIG CLI.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Sean. All right, let's pivot to announcements. And it looks like there's one regarding SIG leads.
All right, if nobody else is going to announce it, I will, because I am a SIG lead. Hi, if you're planning on going to CoopCon Copenhagen and you are the lead of a SIG and you would like to either do an intro or a deep dive session for your SIG, click on those links. The first overview link is a mail from Dan Kahn to the Kubernetes dev mailing list, and therein is a link to a forum where you can sign up as a presenter, sign up a co-presenter if you'd like, so on and so forth. I also signed, excuse me, I also signed myself up and a couple other people to do a deep dive session on dev stats. So Yes, that's right. I did this to also selfishly promote something. The deadline, if you care to register this sort of thing, I personally found it super fascinating to go to the API machinery SIG deep dive at CoopCon in Austin. I did an intro and a deep dive for SIG testing. I attended a SIG apps deep dive. I thought they were personally like way more interesting than some of the conference. If you want to host such a thing, deadline is January 31st. I'm just going to keep on rolling because I happen to be the next announcement item unless anybody has any questions on that one. Okay. Next announcement. SIG Contributor Experience has a new lead. Please welcome our new lead, Paris Pittman. Yay. This yet again highlights that SIGs are kind of changing leads. The way that we did it in our SIG, we actually added her as a lead. The way we did it, I suggested it because I think Paris has been doing a lot of great work for the SIG. I'm not a lead myself. I just think it's pretty cool. And nobody had any objections. We all +1 heard approval from the lead, so we went ahead and did it. I did a pull request to the community repo to update a YAML file. We regenerated docs, and we're done. The decision was recorded in our publicly recorded meeting, which is posted to YouTube. We recognize that there's some people who'd rather have like a documented process we can follow going forward. So one of Paris's first action items as a SIG lead is to help define and refine a SIG charter for contributor experience. So, figure out what is within the scope of SIG contributor experience. It seems like we are coalescing around the idea of a couple sub-projects where people are more interested in just the specific thing instead of the entirety of contributor experience. So if you are interested in talking just about like the contributor guide and mentorship, contributor experience, which normally meets bi-weekly on Wednesdays, is now introducing an off-cycle meeting to also go bi-weekly on the off week to talk about just mentorship and contributor guide stuff, and look to that to become a sub-project. And we're also looking to kind of raise the bus factor on George and Paris when it comes to community management duties. There's a lot that they do behind the scenes, and SIG contributor experience seemed to be the natural place to kind of start documenting that if there are other people who want to help out there. So that's your SIG contributor news update. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And then over to meeting our contributors.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. +1 to everything Aaron said. I'm on a bus, by the way, so let me stop my video really quick. +1 to everything Aaron said about joining contributor experience for all things contributor. So one of the things that we're working on is mentoring initiatives, and one of those initiatives is a event called Meet Our Contributors. That'll happen at least monthly. I'd like for it to happen more often, but that depends on the amount of volunteers that we can get. This will be a 30-minute Ask Us Anything session for contributors by contributors. And then we'll end the call with a 30-minute live peer code review. All documentation is on the links in the meeting agenda today. Looking for volunteers for 2 different time zone sessions. Our first time zone session that starts at 3:30 p.m. UTC is full, but would love to have more contributors on the 9 p.m. UTC time. And the sign-up form, that's a work in progress, is on the agenda as well. This is part of larger mentoring initiatives, and the GitHub repo and the issue that we're working off of is on the agenda as well. Really looking forward to working on these initiatives this year. Contributor growth is a priority, so please join in. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. And then Jace, did you want to talk about the new SIG release lead?
You just briefly, I wasn't even going to think about bringing it up, but since we talked about the CoopExact lead thing too, I wanted to mention that true to what was said, there's not a real formalized process, but Phil Whitrock had sent out an email to the SIG, and there was some discussion on it, and it looked like it was ratified. So yeah, I am officially co-lead of SIG release with Caleb Miles. So really pleased to be able to serve the community in that capacity, and looking forward to seeing the release process continue to evolve and improve over time.
Awesome.
If I could just add really quick, I don't know if it was announced in this meeting or previous one, but we also had a SIG lead change in SIG scheduling. And I think one of the topics that came up is there is no formal process for how we make these changes. Maybe in the future there should be, but Bobby Salamat replaced David Oppenheimer as SIG scheduling co-lead.
Does anybody from the steering committee working on like SIG governance stuff want to speak to that real quickly? Because George,
I'm not on the SC, but I did file a bug on the community repo that we need to document this process. If you're interested,
okay, I'll speak to it as a steering committee member, but I'm not on like the subcommittee. Yes, that's right. We have subcommittees now. It's great. It's working on this. Phil Whitrock and Joe and Michelle Norali would be the people to talk to. You saw a survey go out to SIG leads asking like, what would you say you do here and how do you do it? Trying to formalize like roles and stuff because we recognize different SIGs run different ways. And there was also a survey sent out to, I believe, Kubernetes Dev if you are a participant in SIGs and have feedback on how your SIG is running and what is working well for you and what is not. We're trying to take all of that and compile like best practices, maybe like a choose your own SIG adventure type of thing. Roughly speaking, I think like every SIG should ultimately have a charter that describes what the SIG does and what the roles are within the SIG and some idea of governance. So like, how does your SIG want to decide how to choose leads? Do you want the concept of like terms for SIG leads, stuff like that? I don't think we're going to try and like enforce one common standard that all SIGs must adhere to in terms of the how, but it might be like a what. Like, so, you know, today how we sort of define that like SIGs have leads and SIGs have meetings, and those leads need to be at least from 2 different companies, and you have to have at least like a mission statement of what your SIG is about. It'll probably be like, okay, now have a blurb in there about like how your SIG chooses leads and what does lead mean to you and your SIG and things of that nature. So this is totally a problem you have the power to fix in your own SIG. This is why contributor experience, like we did it and then we realized, oh wait, we don't really have a process. So how about we just document what we just did? And then we'll go from there so that when guidelines do come down from the steering committee, you may already have all the check boxes checked. But take everything I said with a grain of salt because I'm not actually working on that. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. All right, I think that's about it. So let's wrap up. If anyone has any questions or whatnot, feel free to ping people in chat or follow them on Twitter, etc. And I am Mario Loria. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming me and coming on in. I'm at Mario P. Loria on Twitter, and I hope to be back one day soon. So have a good one. Yeah, +1 from George. Thank you very much. Also, I live a mile away from George, and he's making me help him move stuff later today.
Wow.
I feel sorry for me.
Sign.
Mario, just write him a check. Just write him a check and run away.
That's a great idea. I got to find my checkbook, though. All right, everyone have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks.
Happy Thursday.